Sony has just announced the PS5 Pro, so we're going to go through all the details that were announced during that Sony event, including the performance, the specs, the price, because it is expensive, also when it's going to be available, and also my thoughts on all of it, because I think console gaming as we know it might be doomed. And before we go any further, for anyone else that saw the Sony event, does anyone else think that Mark Cerny looks like Garth out of Wayne's World, or is it just me? So Mark, when he did start off that presentation, started talking about the origins of the PS5. So he talked about the PS5 being released 4 years ago, so it was 2020 when it was originally released. He actually talked about up to 120 FPS, so frames per second gaming. What was interesting during that event was that was the first and the last time that Mark mentions 120 FPS. For the rest of the presentation, he just talks about 30 or 60 FPS gaming. He then goes on to talk about graphics modes and how at the moment, whether it's an Xbox or a PS5, you have the same problem. You either have performance mode or high fidelity mode or high graphics mode. So you either want the best graphics available, so your high fidelity mode, but you run at a lower frame rate like 30 frames per second, or you want performance mode, so you're prepared to lose some of that graphical detail so you can run the game faster, so 60 FPS on the PS5. What was interesting from the event, from what Mark said, was that he said 75% of the time players choose performance mode. So most people are willing to sacrifice on graphics in order to get a faster frame rate. So the PS5 Pro is there to try and fix that problem, to try and give you your high graphics at your high frame rate. And it does that by what Mark called the big three. The biggest change hardware wise inside the PS5 Pro is the GPU itself. It's a bigger GPU. It is 67% more compute units with 28% faster RAM in the Pro compared to the original PS5. I was a little disappointed to see that they weren't putting more video RAM in there as well. So for anyone who does PC gaming, you'll know how important it is to have the most video RAM that you can. So it's good that it's faster. It's just a shame that there's not more of it. So given the larger GPU, Mark said you will get up to 45% better rendering with the Pro. Notice he said up to. So that's going to depend on the developers as to how effective they are at getting the better rendering out of the newer chip or out of the newer GPU. Mark also mentioned that it would give you like high fidelity at 60 frames per second. Notice he said the word like. And there's quite a lot in this presentation where he uses the word like or close or comparable. Like they're not committing to having high fidelity at 6 FPS. They're just saying it's going to be close. The second point he talked about was better ray tracing, with 2 or 3 times the performance of the PS5. But again, it depends on the developers of the games as to how good that is. It's not really one of the big three though, because the larger ray tracing is due to the better graphics card. Like you wouldn't get a better graphics card or a better GPU and then go, oh, my ray tracing is less, right? So it's kind of, they're tied. It's not really a 3. It's a 2. The last one definitely is a change though, because it's the PlayStation Spectral Super Resolution, or PSSR. I did see someone else in a video call it PISA. That might catch on, we'll have to see how it goes. That basically is video upscaling or gaming upscaling. So it's taking maybe a 1080p resolution game and upscaling it so it looks like it's 4K. PC gamers have had that for a while with either DLSS if it's an Nvidia card, or FSR if it's an AMD card. This is great for older games so they can upscale them to look like they're 4K. It's been working well in the PC world, so I expect good results in the PS5 Pro when it comes out. The presentations or the examples that they showed, so they showed The Last of Us Part 2 at 60 FPS, compared it to the PS5 running at 30, so you've got high fidelity on the PS5 versus 60 FPS on the Pro. Was smoother on the PS Pro. They showed Marvel Spider-Man 2, Ratchet and Clank, where they talked about close to doubling the power of the PS5. I mean, close is a very subjective thing, like how close is close? They showed Horizon Forbidden West, they showed detail boost, there's better lighting, better visual effects, they said skin and hair was better. Didn't give you a comparison to the PS5 though to show you how much better it actually was. They showed the advanced ray tracing in Gran Turismo 7, where they talked about the reflection of your car in the car next to you as you drive past. They showed Hogwarts Legacy, so better reflections, better casting of shadows, and that was actually really good to see. They showed some other examples of Spider-Man 2, Final Fantasy, and then Horizon Forbidden West, Last of Us Part 2 that we've talked about, a few other games as well. And they're all great changes to games that are actually all quite old. Like, there was no game that was released in this to say, here's the killer game, the killer feature, the one that uses everything that the Pro has to offer and makes this a must-buy console. You kind of watched it and went, cool, it's a bit better. And all the examples that they were using were showing close-ups and freeze frames of games. It's all frozen stills. So whether it's the audience in the back of Ratchet and Clank, you're having to zoom in, or you're looking at The Last of Us. And that actually was a good example. When you zoom into the tower in The Last of Us comparison, you can see the tower and the writing's a little bit clearer, but you can also see the windows. So on the PS5, the windows are solid, whereas on the PS5 Pro, the windows are clear and you can see through to the other side. So there's definitely more processing power in the Pro. I just don't know that you're going to notice, because I'm probably more worried about the zombies at the bottom of the tower that I'm trying to shoot with my gun than marveling at the fact that I can see through the window of a tower that's 10 miles away from where I'm trying to shoot. And that's assuming I've got my face like 2 inches away from the monitor. If I'm playing this on a TV in a lounge and I'm sitting 6 feet or more away from my TV, I'm definitely not going to notice the difference. The frame rate though, I definitely think you'll notice the difference. 30 to 60 FPS is quite a big jump. But having said that, you can get 60 FPS on the PS5 if you tone down the graphical detail a bit. There is also one more hardware design change because the PS5 Pro, and I don't think Mark talked about it in the presentation, but there is 2 terabytes of internal storage with the PS5 Pro compared to 1 terabyte that's in the current PS5. So you are getting double the storage with the PS5 Pro. And honestly, given the size of games and how much bigger they're getting, that's a good change. Physically looking at the outside, design-wise, it looks very similar to the current version of the PS5, so the PS5 Slim. The Pro is the same depth and width as the current PS5, but it's the same height as the original PS5. I was really happy when the Slim came out. I was like, finally, we're getting the PS5 into a more manageable size, and now we've gone back to being a massive console again. You can understand why they've done that though, because the disk drive that is currently with the PS5 is also compatible with the PS5 Pro, so you're helping to keep costs down because you're using reusable components. Now we're going to get into price, because price is just expensive. There's no other way around this. They never said the price, they just put it up on screen right at the end. So it's going to cost $700 US, which is a lot of money. And if you don't live in the States, you actually get even more screwed. So in the UK, it's £700, 800 euros in Europe. And I don't even want to guess how much this is going to cost in Australia and New Zealand when it hits our shores. The even worse piece is that the $700 doesn't include a disk drive. So you have to pay another $80 on top of the $700 to add the disk drive to the PS5 Pro, plus the vertical stand is also an extra $30. So if you wanted to buy the PS5 Pro with the disk drive and the stand, you're going to have to pay $810 US. So if you compare that price wise to the PS5 Slim, with or without a disk drive, $500, $450. So the PS5 Pro without the disk drive, now granted it does have 2 terabytes of storage, well that's $700. So $450 for the PS5 digital, $700 for the PS5 Pro. It is more than 50% more expensive than the PS5. Now if you compare the disk drive version, so the PS5 Pro plus the disk drive is going to cost you $780. Compare that to the PS5 Slim with a disk drive, that's $500. So it's still more than 50% more expensive to get the Pro over the standard. So why is it so expensive, and why haven't Sony dropped the price? Well, I think part of it comes down to just everything is more expensive. Whether it's parts, whether it's shipping, whether it's manufacturing, everything is just more expensive than it used to be. And part of it is also because they can. Sony has outsold the Xbox 2-1. PS5 to Xbox 2-1. That's increased to 5-1 in the first quarter of this year. So there's no incentive for Sony to lower the price because they are leading the market so much. They can pretty much dictate whatever price they want to. So whether that performance increase is worth the $250 difference between the two is kind of up to yourself. I think this has a really interesting bearing on where is this all heading? Like, what's the future of console gaming? Well, I think in keeping with the Sony presentation, let's call it the big three observations. First is physical discs, I think, are on the way out. Now, whilst it's something that Sony and Microsoft have to cater for those that want it, I don't think it's the direction that either of them really want to go in. Like, why would you bother manufacturing a disc and distributing it to retailers so they can then sell it when you could just sell the game with none of that hassle online direct to the consumer? Plus, because it's digital, you can't then sell it on as a second-hand game to somebody else, and someone who normally buys second-hand games can't do that either. They'd have to wait for like a sale on the Sony store to buy the game on a discount sale maybe a year or two after it comes out. So it's more money in the pockets of Sony. Second, I think, is that cheap gaming is done. And I don't know that's necessarily a bad thing. Like, you're now seeing two tiers in console gaming. We had it with the PS4, the PS4 Pro. We've now got it with PS5, PS5 Pro. So it's similar to PC gaming. So if you're looking at a 4060 graphics card versus a 4070 Super, well, would you spend the extra $250 to get that performance boost? Maybe you would, maybe you wouldn't, but you have that choice. Like, I honestly didn't see that level of performance difference in the examples that they were showing in the presentation to justify that price difference. Having said that, it is early days, so maybe they can get that performance difference out once developers start adding or developing for the Pro. The only problem with consoles is, at least with a PC, I could start off with a cheaper graphics card and then go and replace the graphics card if I want better performance. And that's not as expensive as a console, where if I want better performance, I've now got to buy an entirely new thing. So now we're starting to get into the price bracket where you're not too far off with the PS5 Pro of starting to buy entry-level PCs. And then you can go and upgrade the graphics card as you go down the line. You can get more memory, you can go and get more storage, and it works out a lot cheaper in the long run. So as people's expectations change and improve and get more demanding, I think the idea of consoles being cheap is, well, kind of a thing of the past. The third thing I think is that Performance Pro Plus is coming. So we had performance mode with the PS5 and the Xbox Series X, where players either wanted higher performance, lower graphics, or better graphics than 30 frames per second instead of 60. But as Mark mentioned in the Sony presentation, 75% of people pick performance. So is 60 FPS going to be enough for the PS5 Pro when PC games can go so much higher? And what about TVs and monitors that can run at 120 frames per second or higher? I think we're going to get to the stage where we'll be back at where the PS5 was. People will say 60 FPS was great, but I'll be quite willing to lower graphical detail if you can give me 120 frames per second. So I think give it a while and we'll be back at the same scenario again, and then maybe we get a PS5 Pro Plus. I don't know, we'll see where that goes. So to sum it all up, we've now got a Pro PS5 that is 50% more expensive than the standard PS5 for double the frame rate at similar or like or close high fidelity to the PS5 in high fidelity mode. Is that worth it? Not from what I've seen, but let me know what you think in the comments down below. Thanks for watching. If you have enjoyed it, let me know in the comments down below as well. If you've enjoyed the video, don't forget to press the like button and even consider subscribing if you're not. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.